Sydney's Queen Victoria Building has stood proudly for more than 120 years. With its magnificent Romanesque architecture, the QVB Sydney is a testament to the craftsmanship and attention to detail of a bygone era. This heritage-listed shopping arcade stretches across 3 stories, crowned by a central dome that soars 60 meters above the ground. It was a striking presence on the late 19th century Sydney skyline. Yet, despite its beauty, the Queen Victoria Building Sydney faced repeated calls for demolition in the late 1950s and 1960s. So why was such an iconic landmark nearly lost? Let's explore its story. The origins of this grand building can be traced back to 1810, when Governor Macquarie moved Sydney's produce markets from the Rocks to a new site on the outskirts of town. The chosen location, bounded by Druitt, York, Market, and George Streets, was ideal thanks to its proximity to Darling Harbour and Parramatta Road, both key transport links in a rapidly expanding settlement. The markets flourished, and Governor Richard Bourke later directed convict architect Francis Greenway to design a new marketplace for the site. Greenway's plan included a domed building, which was eventually converted into a police station and courthouse, alongside a large cross-shaped market house. In 1846, the land was granted to Sydney City Council for the token rent of just 1 farthing a year. The only condition: the site must remain a marketplace. For decades, the markets thrived, but by the late 1870s, critics were calling for change. They complained about the rundown buildings, the noise, and the smells, unwelcome features in what had become the heart of Sydney's civic and business district. The contrast was stark. Across the road, the city was constructing the Grand Sydney Town Hall, a stunning example of Victorian architecture. Next to it, the aging central markets looked shabby and out of place. City leaders were eager to redevelop the site into something that matched the elegance of its surroundings, a luxurious shopping arcade unlike anything Sydney had seen. The obstacle was the legal requirement from 1846 that the land continue to function as a marketplace. To move forward with their dream of creating a grand shopping arcade, the Sydney City Council needed to secure approvals. A clever solution was proposed. The new Queen Victoria Building Sydney would include a fruit and vegetable market in its basement, complete with a hydraulic lift to transport horses and wagons from street level down to the marketplace below. This compromise honored the original requirement that the site remain a marketplace, while allowing the vision for a luxurious arcade to move ahead. In 1891, the council pushed forward with its plan, demolishing the old markets, and soon after, the police station and courthouse. The responsibility of designing the new building fell to George McRae, a young and ambitious city architect eager to make his mark on Sydney's history. McRae produced 4 potential designs, each bold enough to rival the neighbouring Sydney Town Hall. The council ultimately chose his Romanesque Revival design, a style that would define the QVB Sydney for generations. Construction began in 1893, and despite the challenges of the era, the colossal project advanced at remarkable speed. Over the course of 4 years and 8 months, workers, earning just 5 shillings a day, brought the vision to life. The construction of the Queen Victoria Building coincided with Australia's recovery from the banking crisis of 1893, and the project quickly became a symbol of resilience and economic renewal. By 1898, the monumental 3-story sandstone structure was complete, and it officially opened as the Queen Victoria Market Building. The interior was breathtaking. Flooded with natural light, it featured a long colonnade arcade running through the ground floor and lavish decorative details that made the building as much a spectacle to behold as a place to shop. The early tenants of the QVB reflected the prosperity and diversity of the age. Big names like Penfolds Wines and Singer Sewing Machines set up shop, alongside tailors, bootmakers, herbalists, and corset fitters. On the first floor, 17 large showrooms included one of Quong Tart's famous tea houses, cementing the Queen Victoria Building Sydney as both a shopping destination and a social hub. The second floor of the Queen Victoria Building Sydney offered 12 large rooms, including an art gallery, while the third floor was perhaps the most spectacular. At the Druitt Street end stood the Grand Coffee Palace, complete with lavish dining rooms, galleries, and 57 bedrooms for guests. At the Market Street end, A cavernous concert hall stretched 2 levels high, soaring an impressive 13 meters. Despite all this grandeur, the QVB Sydney struggled financially from the start. In its first year of operation, only 47 shops were occupied, and the building continued to run at a loss year after year. The Sydney City Council grew increasingly desperate to find ways to make the Queen Victoria building profitable. At one point, it was even offered to the railways as a potential underground station site, though the proposal was rejected. By 1917, the decision was made to remodel the building in hopes of attracting more tenants. Renovations began in 1918, and while they did create additional floor space, they also stripped the QVB of much of its character. Decorative voids between floors were reduced, limiting natural light. The tessellated tiles on the ground floor were concreted over, and stone columns were boxed in. Most dramatically, the magnificent concert hall was converted into a 3-story library. These changes dulled the Queen Victoria building's once impressive interiors. Worse, the alterations failed to improve its financial fortunes. By 1933, the building's accumulated debt had grown to more than £500,000. 2 years later, the Sydney County Council's electricity department moved in as the major tenant, making further alterations that permanently scarred the building. They filled in what remained of the floor voids and even removed the building's stained glass inner dome, its very centerpiece. Public resentment toward the QVB Sydney grew. By the late 1950s, Lord Mayor Harry Jensen openly called for its demolition to make way for a new town square and underground car park. The plan gained significant support, with newspapers reflecting the public's disdain. Even celebrated modernist architect Harry Seidler dismissed the QVB as an architectural monstrosity, a wasteful, stupid building. Minor demolition work began in 1963, when the building's smaller rooftop cupolas were removed and sold off, some ending up as garden decorations. For a time, the fate of the Queen Victoria building Sydney seemed sealed. Yet by the early 1970s, public opinion began to shift, and in 1971, the newly elected City Council viewed the building's potential in a very different light. By the early 1970s, a new understanding of the Queen Victoria building's heritage value was taking shape. In 1974, the National Trust officially classified the QVB Sydney, recognizing it as an important landmark worth saving. As the 1980s began, Sydney City Council struck a profit-sharing deal with a developer to restore the building. The project included constructing a new underground car park and creating pedestrian links to Town Hall Station and Pitt Street Mall, ensuring the QVB would be seamlessly connected to the city's modern transport and shopping hubs. The restoration was both ambitious and risky. Much of the building's internal layers, office floors and partitions that had been added over decades, had to be demolished to bring back its original grandeur. Finally, in 1986, Premier Barry Unsworth officially reopened the Queen Victoria building Sydney. After nearly a century of struggle, the QVB was reborn as one of Sydney's premier shopping arcades and a must-see attraction for both locals and visitors. Today, the Queen Victoria building stands as a stunning example of resilience in Sydney history, a place where heritage, architecture, and modern commerce blend seamlessly. From its near demolition to its triumphant revival, the QVB Sydney remains one of the city's most beloved landmarks. What do you think? Should the basement have become part of Sydney's underground railway system? Would the city have been better served if the site had been turned into a public square like London's Trafalgar Square? Or did things turn out exactly as they should have? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear them. If you enjoyed this story of the Queen Victoria building Sydney, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to History Love for more fascinating explorations of the past, and support us on Patreon to help keep these stories alive. History is full of surprises, and there's always more to uncover. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.